I'd like to call this meeting of, or excuse me, study session of Lakewood City Council for Tuesday, May 28th, 2019 to order. The first item of business is a review the recommendation of the Colonial Plaza Art Project. Ms. Martinez.
Good evening, council members. I'm here tonight to discuss the Colonial Plaza Art Project. Back in January, the Arts Commission was asked to assist in facilitating the process of selecting an artist to be commissioned for the public artwork at the Colonial Plaza. We convened at that point, the Arts Commission convened a stakeholders group. It was an 11-member group. And what I'd like to say about that group is it was really reflective of Lakewood. It was a very diverse group, and it was representative of nonprofit organizations and businesses as well as business owners. They convened to form an RFP that was then disseminated to artists. And then once the artists submitted their artwork, they met 2 times. The first time they actually met, they didn't meet. They, out of their own homes, individually scored the artwork. They all used the same rubric and the same form. And then we convened together and had a discussion. They brought in their top 3 selections. And because there was a clear delineation in the top 3, we discussed the top 3 primarily. It was clear after that meeting that Perry Howard was the highest scoring artist with 300 points, and she also had the most votes. She had 7 of the stakeholders voted for her. Tonight, we have the top 3 artists here to give a 5-minute or less presentation. Perry Howard had the 300 points. Karsten Boyson is also here, and he had 208 points. And Chuck Fitzgerald, and he had 134 points. At the May 6th meeting, the Arts Commission reviewed the stakeholders' recommendation for Perry Howard and agreed to come forward to the City Council with that recommendation, which leads us to tonight. And with that, we can go into the presentations. Perry Howard will go first, since she was the highest scoring. But she is from Twisp, and it would have been a 9-hour drive round trip. So she did a short video for us.
Could you refresh our recollection about what exactly the artist was asked to respond to in the RFP?
Yes.
What were the parameters?
So they were told the budget was $50,000. They were told there'd be 2 art pieces, one at each entrance across from each other. They were told that we would like it to have some height, and that a water feature was encouraged, that the material should stand the test of time and be graffiti resistant or able to wash their graffiti off, to provide a visual entrance to the plaza that ideally links history and our cultural heritage of the city and the Colonial Center. And those were the primary.
Okay, thank you.
So everyone knows, Sally, the scoring rubric, if they need to refresh their recollections on page 16 of the packet. If there's anything
Hi, my name is Perry Howard, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present this artwork proposal for your consideration from afar this evening. The Festival Street promises to be a wonderful addition to the city of Lakewood. It's destined to become a regional attraction and certainly a hotspot for locals, too. I have completed a wide range of public artworks, all on a site-specific basis. Each project is responsive to its unique situation, and no two are the same. Upon reflection is the working concept for the proposed artworks. This concept speaks to the solace derived from living in proximity to water and within a community that reflects on its own history and heritage. The two sculptures will be a reflection of each other, with a form that is evocative of a lofted boat, a tree, or perhaps a seed pod that one finds in nature. This work is open to interpretation, inviting everyone to form unique yet shared emotional responses. The artwork is comprised of a pair of steel sculptures with natural stone bases. Each sculpture may or may not function as fountains depending on what we choose to do. These two sculptures will face each other on either side of a festival street, designed for pedestrians, but must allow for vehicles as well. This steel artwork will be of an eye-catching color, to be determined in collaboration with project stakeholders and city officials. The organic sliced stone base will ground the steel sculptures from below. The artwork will be sited on top of a concrete plinth with a reservoir surround that will accommodate 300 gallons of water. The water will be recirculated and will flow down either from the top of the stone or the top of the sculpture. Both options may be explored, and both will be tested in real time to make a final determination that's best for the plaza. Even when water is not flowing, the combination of symmetrical steel sculptures and organic stone bases form a gateway that will create a welcoming feel for the plaza. The steel artworks are 6 feet tall, atop 2 natural stone bases that are 4 feet tall, with an overall height of 10 feet. This scale fits well within the landscape design and is at eye level or a little above to catch the attention of visitors and passers-by. The artwork will also serve as a meetup point for friends and family to connect and engage. The budget for this artwork includes the 2 stone bases, 2 steel sculptures, assembly, installation, and cutting drilling to accommodate the fountain mechanism. Budget allows for flexibility of the fountain to cover only the base of the artwork or flow to the top of the artwork. Contingency funds will be refunded if unused, as will permits and licensing fees. This work assumes that the water reservoir, electrical hookup, and water hookup will be provided by others. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
I'd like to add that when the stakeholders saw that she had the highest number of votes, that they had many questions for her, and I could speak to those. It ran a wide gamut of things, but if you, I don't know if you're going to wait till the end for questions, but if you have any, I've printed those off and her responses to make that a more robust presentation since she couldn't be here. Okay, I'd like to introduce Karsten Boysen. He had 208 points, and you can speak at the podium, please.
Good evening, members of the council and guests. My name is Karsten Boysen. It's good to see you all again after the installation of my sculpture, the lotus blossom that graces your city now. Let me review my proposal, which is called Double Eagle. To add insult to injury, I'm going to use a laser. I don't know what it's going to. There it is. Oh, does it? Oh, okay. Which one?
This green here.
Okay. Okay, my proposal is called the Double Eagle. The first part of this proposal is called Vector, Eagle, Vector. What attracted me to this public art project was the site itself. The intersection, or conjunction really, of Gravelly Lake Drive, Motor Avenue, and Bridgeport Way, a colossal vector of transportation, of sky, of land, and of water, and notably the Joint Base Lewis McChord and the city of Lakewood. Vector in this instance not only refers to the physical site, but also the function of this area. You may recall that vector analysis in higher mathematics is responsible for spaceflight, airplane, and marine navigation, as well as Army maneuvers. I've always been fascinated with the concept of vector. It is the intersection of many things at one place in space. And that's what we're trying to bring attention to in this project. The water feature here is a laminar fountain, which enhances the visual appeal, but also provides an opportunity for interaction by the people of Lakewood, especially the children. If you're not familiar with a laminar fountain, go to Ruston over by Tacoma, and the plaza there is graced with a laminar fountain. The laminar fountain is a very clear, pure jet of water that can be illuminated with LED lights. This is complemented across Motor Avenue by a sculpture called Eagle Rising, a metaphor for the strength of our country, especially as represented by our Air Force. Spawning fish represent the spirit rising up through the eagle wings. I feel honored to have been chosen a finalist in the Colonial Plaza Art Project. One of the things I like doing about public art is the collaborative approach utilized in doing art for the community. In 1978, I founded the Olympia Art Commission just for that purpose. As the artists coming here, we bring a vision, a new set of eyes perhaps, so that you may see and value your community in a new way. I urge you to accept the choices made by your selection committee, including the council members, art commission, business people, local artists. They have all volunteered their time and energy to this project as part of the collaboration. If I had been on this committee, I too would have picked Perry Howard as first. You, the City Council, should trust this process and the choice you are making for the citizens of Lakewood, which is another portion of this collaboration. Ultimately, the conclusion of this collaboration will be the people of Lakewood seeing and enjoying this new public art. No work of art is complete until it is viewed and experienced. The people complete this creative process. I ask you now to add your part in this creative process by choosing all three of us to complete the final project. You and the people of Lakewood will get more bang for the buck and get 3 works of art for the price of 1. May I suggest you separate this work project by awarding Perry Howard for her proposal on the east corner of Gravelly Lake Drive and Motor Avenue with the water feature, at $36,000. Then award me $9,000 for my portion, and Chuck Fitzgerald $5,000 for his portion for the west corner across the street. Of course, there may have to be minor adjustments in our initial proposals. So, out of many, many artists who submitted proposals, you collaboratively choose the top 3. This is a novel approach to selecting public art, but you will be rewarded with more art and more diversity in this project. It is the creative thing to do. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Chuck Fitzgerald. Is Chuck here tonight? It looks like Chuck is not here tonight. I haven't heard from him. We could defer to what is in his proposal. Chuck submitted a proposal that actually had 5 proposals within it, 5 different designs within his one proposal. Thank you. Okay, I can go forward from here. He suggested that in terms of the water element, that he would not recommend a water element. So his first example is a proposed column made of aluminum with icons that are wrapped around it that represent the city of Lakewood, as you can see here. You can see where the possible water could flow through the top. It's a tall column. It's made of thick aluminum with a silicone bronze wrap. Next is his cubes. So these are stacked cubes. Similar, they form a long, tall shape, and they have different representations imprinted on them. They're also made of aluminum with laser cut line images. From what I understand, we could adjust those to what we decide on as a group. Example number 3, again, are columns, but these are made out of vinyl and have some geometric properties. Example 4 is a laser cut aluminum salmon. It's 8 to 10 feet tall, and again, it's made out of aluminum. I don't know. It would be in his proposal. I don't see it in his Tacoma Art Museum. And example 5 is a bent aluminum salmon. This actually mentions that it could be used as a bench and kind of be interactive, where people could touch it and walk around it and possibly have a seating element to it. He did not submit a budget. So that concludes the presentations. again, the Arts Commission had recommended Perry Howard, and we'll look for your guidance.
Yeah, a few questions. So with regard to the initial budget on the RFP, you might explain how Ms. Howard's project grew a little bit based upon feedback from commission through you to her, and how the option for the granite boulders and the potential water connection increased the budget a bit?
Sure, sure. And
Because her
the,
initial proposal was 50, but it was
Yes.
reduced down, and then we had some conversation, and we said provide some options with whatever the additional cost would be, and that's how that came about.
yeah, exactly. So her initial budget is $50,000. There was some concern that people would want to climb on her sculpture because it looks like a ladder. And so it was then suggested, could she use granite stones? And everyone loved that idea. So her second budget incorporates the granite. She actually has sourced the granite. It's a very accurate budget with the $80,000. Although it's more, she could do the stone.
Other questions, comments?
Extra water.
Mr. Branstad?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question when we embarked on this project, and we talked about it, wanting to have some art as a part of our vision for the Motor Avenue, Complete Street, Festival Streets, Colonial Plaza, as it is morphed in terms of title, but it's all the same project. And the discussion about artwork had to do with that we wanted to have something that, because this location, more so than the other locations in the city where we have put public art, was going to have multimodal exposure. That we were going to have pedestrians, we were going to have people and who will spend in cars, but we were going to have some people spend a good bit of time there. It wasn't a piece of art that people were going to notice as they passed, but that they would be able to take as much time as they wanted to work to experience. And we discussed, I thought we discussed with the Arts Commission and staff and each other, that we really were looking for something that spoke to history and heritage, and in some way the diversity, to be able to go and do that, so that it would be, and that message would be conveyed by the members of the public that encountered it. And I expected that we would go forward with that theme of asking artists to provide us something of that nature. So could you tell me why the Arts Commission decided in the RFP to say there is no theme?
I don't know, I don't think that's accurate, but.
It said there's no predetermined theme, is what the RFP said.
In terms of the history, it gave them guidance on where to look for the history of the Colonial Plaza and encouraged that they do that. So just as you said, they could incorporate some of the history and heritage and symbolism in the artwork. The tricky part about the Colonial Plaza is it does speak to the past, but there's also a strong focus on the future and being modern. It's not a historic district. And I think from what we saw with the artists, it may be easier said than done to pull in different cultures and history. And I think that's why some of them focused on nature, eagles and water, because we are Lakewood and we're a land of lakes, and that's what people identify with. I think the idea that there is no theme is when we visited the art, what was it, the policy, the art policy. It didn't have a theme in it. The theme is open, so there hasn't been a predetermined theme for the art in Lakewood in general for sculptures and public art pieces.
Okay, and so then, in the scoring rubric, where the stakeholders group evaluated adherence to the theme, what was the intent of, in the scoring rubric of what they were supposed, what were they scoring?
So they were scoring on, when you mentioned modalities that people are going to be walking and driving and biking by, one of the scoring items was, can people who are driving by see it? Can people who are walking by see it? People who are going different speeds see it? And then there was another one for the beauty, just the beauty that it brings to the area, as opposed to a theme. Does it enhance the area?
I think part of the guidance was we were looking for something columnar in stature with some height.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, all the proposals, I think, kind of addressed that, and they were, as the theme indicated on the page there, it was to, hearken or speak to Lakewood history and culture, but not with any particular precision or definition. And, there was Hanford McLeod, for example, of the Nisqually tribe. He was on the scoring committee. So, he scored all of these, and to the extent you want to share his score, I think I wasn't there and I didn't participate in the scoring. I went to the subsequent meeting just to kind of hear the comments from the folks who did the scoring. But it seemed like they felt comfortable that the pieces of the top three incorporated some semblance of theme consistent with the goal to have something of stature and height for the entrance into the Colonial Center. I think that was part and parcel more the theme than perhaps any historical figure or period of time, that kind of a thing.
And the water feature.
And the water feature was important, yeah.
Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. And I don't know if you can answer this question, and if you can't, I know where I want to go next with my questions. Did you have any knowledge before this meeting that Mr. Boyson would make the suggestion that he did about three pieces of art from three artists?
I did not.
Okay. Since you, sir, were the one that brought it up, and since the other two artists didn't, my question to you is, do the other two artists know about your proposal?
As far as I know, no, they didn't.
So as far as you know, you may be, and I mean no disrespect, speaking out of turn?
That's something that might have to be negotiated with them.
Fine.
And
I'm not
that would be the
disparaging your idea.
completion of the collaborative process.
No, and I take your point. I think it's a well-taken point. I just wanted to get a sense of the moving parts here. If you see what I'm saying, as far as what the other artists may or may not think. And I just wanted to be clear before we make a decision where that comes down.
Perhaps it might be something that would be referred back to the Arts Commission and explored with the individual artists.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from council?
Well, do we want to?
I guess to add my comments, I'm frankly not feeling it. We have one chance to do it right. I'd spend 4 times the money if I felt there was a wow factor. To me, it doesn't say Lakewood, it doesn't connect with the people of Lakewood, the history of Lakewood, the Colonial Center. It's an abstract piece of metal. And is subject to varying interpretations because it's an abstract piece of metal, but I would like to see something that has more, a more concrete tie to the community. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and I'm sorry I missed that. I had my day job got in the way of the presentations, but I will say with outdoor art, you know, when I went to Western Washington University in Bellingham in the early 80s, and they were considered to have one of the best outdoor art collections around at the time. And I would say that there really was no central theme. There was no, you know, it didn't have to do with the history of Western. It didn't have to do with, it was just art. And I think in my mind, the thing with outdoor art is it has to do something with the landscape that it's in, unless you're gonna do like a statue of Norton Clapp or something, which, you know, it really needs to fit the situation that it's in rather than us trying to pigeonhole it into history, because I guess I'm not quite sure, because I've thought about Lakewood history and I'm like, well, what would it be? And, you know, what part of the history? And modern history, the past, the prairie, what was here. So I just got back to this idea that it has to fit in the situation that it's fit. And I think that what the committee selected works in the situation that it's in. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. You know, I guess my concern is if we sent them back, if there was consensus to send the commission back to the drawing board, which I want to hear and get a sense for. You know, if we want something more specific, we got to name it to claim it. Because otherwise, they're going to go forward as best they could with, you know, maybe I didn't have sufficient good guidance to give them, but I thought the theme articulated in the RFP was pretty open enough to kind of get people and their creative juices flowing to provide us with something that met those parameters. So if we were to go back and we want something more definitive, like we'd like to see a bronze statue of a person that has historical significance, that's a different articulated theme than what we provided the commission. And I'm not sure that's necessarily what we want. There were a couple of other submissions that I think you saw in the packet last week, but didn't bubble to the top 3 or 4, that had more interesting nature animals that were kind of whimsical. And I forget which gentleman or woman provided that one, but there were beautiful bronze pieces of animals on interesting things, like a teeter-totter on a boulder with a cool ball, and they had some impressions on. Those were kind of fun. People could touch and feel. But that was a submission that the Arts Commission got a chance to view, and they didn't feel like it rose enough to the top for whatever reason. So, you know, my thought is I'd like to hear what people think. You know, I don't know if I want to get a little input from one member from the Historical Society and see what his thought is, since he necessarily wasn't on the committee, but he certainly has a perspective about history in the Colonial Center. He'd probably love us to bronze the clock, perhaps, and put it out there, but that wasn't the task. Anyway, so I throw it out there. I think they did what they could with the submissions. As you remember, the last time we went around, we went through the RFP process twice to get a couple of substantial things, and ended up with Mr. Boyson's piece on that. And, you know, art is in the eye of the beholder, and so you get people all over the spectrum. You have some that absolutely love it, like you would think, and some people that go, great propeller, where's the lotus blossom? But that's the thing, it evokes conversation. And That's the thing about art, so that's my comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had this brief conversation with Deputy Mayor on Saturday morning during his our workouts, and art is subjective. You know, there's no easy way around this. Art is a very subjective subject. Where I perk up is when we talk about history. And as my colleagues know, and as you, Mr. Boyson, will now find out, for 28 years I taught that in a college. And I hear a lot of talk about art, or excuse me, history. And I would like to point out it's not always about the past. It's leaning forward into the future. Now, I'm not going to insult this man and say this is what I think was the best one. I won't do that to you, sir, because I respect what you do. But I think that if we try to tie it to the past history of the Colonial Center, which is already steeped in history, we're not leaning forward. And so my whole take on this is that I would like to see, and I liked what the committee has put forward. I liked all three pieces, that we keep that in mind as we move. Now, to be very direct, and like I say, I do a little bit of fine arts photography. I have an Emmy in some of this work. I did like the #1 selection simply because it is so clear and simple and forward. It's along the same lines of what you have created, but I think, to the way I understand and see art, that first selection works for me. But those are my thoughts on the subject. Thank you.
Ms. Bloss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not one with an eye for art until I see it in place. But on page 35 in our packet is the one that caught my eye. And I think and the reason being, I looked at it with the different pieces in there with an explanation of what those represent would pretty much cover what we're trying to, somewhat what we're trying to bring out. But that was the one that caught my eye. I think it has some of everything of our history, basically, some of what our history is all about. So that's just my thought, but that's just my personal thought.
You're talking about 34 and 35 together? Or just 35?
I'm just looking at 35. 34 and 35, but 35 is the one that stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
It could. Mm-hmm.
The other thing I should mention is only a few of the artists submitted a budget. I think the 50,000 is a challenge to work with. And when Perry made her artwork, they were a reflection of each other, so there's also an economy of scale to that. So there's a reason she can do it for that price. And the others did not submit a budget, so I don't know what they're looking at.
Mr. Carson.
Just for informational purposes, anytime you include a water element in a work of art, 50% of the cost of your commission is going to be underground.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Yeah. No, it's a
The
great point.
city, I think,
Yeah,
is-
it's a great point, and, when we all talked about water, I think we were all hopeful to get something that actually caught some eye movement a little bit and wasn't necessarily a spray feature, although I know that there's been some clamoring for a spray feature someplace in the city, whether it's in the urban park someday here in the town center. My personal view, while this was Mr. Boyson's effort to kind of accommodate the theme that was given to him. I don't think that's the right spot for it because it just doesn't work with the two locations at the Colonial Center. If you walk over there and look, people aren't going to have the opportunity to really play because it's a really small kind of space for any sort of water. And the other thing about water is it's got to be something that's easier to maintain. And so in feedback on 2 of the submissions that had water, there were provisions made by the artist to make it a little bit more maintenance-free. So for example, Perry's piece has more of a pondless system where there's kind of a basin dug and then steep enough that you can have a pond of water and it's filled with rocks to keep people out of it, and the water just kind of goes down to the rocks from the boulders themselves. Similarly, the Doug Random thing, which didn't make the top 5 or top 3, he had that misting thing through the spirit faces in an effort to reduce the maintenance issue, but still provide some homage to the water element that we had discussed and to provide some sort of visual catch, if you will, using a form of water. So there you go.
And that said, from what I understand, the water is in place, the water system is in place.
Yeah, it was all plumbed to have water there, so it's just a matter of the connection and the hookup.
Mr. Redstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that, once you put something like this in place, it's going to be there a long time, and you need to make sure that you've put in place something that we like. The memorial, the Veterans Memorial in front of City Hall, and while that was designed as a memorial and it had a theme, and so it's sort of the exception to saying we never used the theme when we were looking to create something to do that. That we have the example at the Sounder Station that we had an original concept and people didn't know what to make of it other than they didn't like it. Okay, and they read a theme into it that wasn't the artist's intent, and ultimately that got changed through a rather process by not just accepting the initial process, but in contracting with someone, but doing some consideration. When we did the installation on Washington Boulevard, and there it was not so much a multimodal piece, but it was something that you needed to be substantial and solid, would serve as a landmark, but would be viewed in passing by the vast majority of folks. And the deputy mayor is right. It has stimulated conversation. Folks maybe call it by a number of different names, but that it is generally appreciated, and for what it does. I had trouble getting that sense from these particular things of seeing them there at that location. I guess I was particularly concerned about the one that has been recommended to us, that the artist said, well, people can interpret it to be whatever they wish to interpret it to be. Okay, that's I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I think if $50,000 is not the right amount to get us to something, because we are expecting that Festival Street to be a major catalyst project. It wasn't that we were putting in a piece of art at an already established location like we did at Washington Boulevard. Here we want the totality of the project that we put there to be consistent with that being a catalyst for economic development, and, but also the other elements that are in our vision for the city, you know, for diversity, for heritage, to be an attractive place so that it becomes something that we're known for along with our other parks and recreation activities, to be able to go and do that. Yeah, I'd be more open to reconsidering whether we need to get what we want, we need to make a greater investment. And while I don't think we have to be extremely specific to the point of where we're directive in terms of a theme, I am concerned that no theme at all doesn't, you know, for something as significant as this, gets you the vast array of options that become hard to compare, to be able to go and do that. So I'm not in a hurry to rush going through to do that. If there is another way to do that, I accept that each of the pieces that are presented to us have positive qualities as works of pieces of art. I don't have anything to do that. It's a question of that location and our intent for that location that I just have trouble seeing with any of the three we've looked at today.
Thank you. I'm not an artist. I'm kind of like Mary. I know what I like, but I could never reproduce it. I think I like number one. It would be nice if it were two salmon on either side mirroring, you know, using the same concept, but salmon or a Native American who settled this territory. Could be multiple of things. Could be the trees. It could be with the water coming down. So those are ideas, but I keep coming back to the process. We have asked people to make these choices. We've put that responsibility on them. And yes, I know we get the yes or no vote, but we did entrust them to go through the process, and I think they did a good job, and I think they brought us three good choices. So I'm not opposed to number one, although I'm kind of like the mayor in my wish that it mirrored Lakewood more. So that's all I have to say.
It seems like these artists are quite open to working with that's not necessarily this or nothing. Could you consider an artist and then saying, we like this, but we'd like you to adjust this?
I mean, for instance, I wonder if Perry might consider something actually more canoe shape, or something with a little bit of Native American flavor to it, or something to that effect. That might be a little bit more distinctive and culturally significant for the prairie area historically. I mean, I don't have a dog in the fight because I didn't score it. You know, I'm just kind of facilitating part of the process. What kind of comments did you, other than the scoring rubric, what comments orally did the folks who scored or some of the commission members give you that gave you a sense as to why they were excited or promoted this particular piece or these top three pieces? What were they looking at that they thought made it fit what we were looking for, as best we articulated what we were looking for?
Getting back to the nature, that when it comes to a theme, it is so hard, just as we try to drill down right now, it's so hard to identify it. And going back to nature in the lakes and the reflection on the lakes. They particularly liked how she provided a sketch of what first inspired her. So she sketched the lake and the trees on the lake, and then there was the slide of the trees being reflected in the water. And that was her initial concept, and from that, she formed her artwork. That very much resonated with them as being a city of lakes.
Anything else?
I think we
You know,
need
this
it.
is not, this is not an unusual result from a public art selection process. One thing's almost always a truism, you ask for $50,000 limit, you get $50,000.
Right.
The other one is, the people who are interested in participating in the committee generally have different visions than the public at large. So those are not, this isn't unusual, it's probably a curse of the project. Personally, I think maybe $100,000 project's gonna be better than a $50,000 project.
And that's why she came back with the editor on hers, yeah.
I'd rather do it right than save money.
Well, no, I think we just need to be clear, because Sally's looking at us for some guidance. We have to be clear that we want to go back and reopen the RFP process. Is that, if that's what we're hearing a consensus of, that tweaks it with a budget of up to, not to exceed 100,000, with the precise components that we have in there. But I don't know if I were to be able to articulate exactly what council's looking for. If you were, as a liaison, it's like, well, they want more of a theme. Here was a nature theme, they want more of a historical theme. I couldn't tell you what that means if I go back to them as a liaison. Yeah. Do we want something more solid, kind of like the large bronze that Carson did originally in a different form? Do we want more Native American appeal to it? Do we want a humanoid, a human visage? It's really hard, and that's why we kind of left it to the impression of the people who do this for a living that have experience with public art. So I hear what you're saying. I don't have a dog in the fight, except I want to honor some of the process, but I have no problem recommending, if it's council's desire, to go back and tweak this, or maybe have them, the existing three, maybe look at additional components, if that's what the council's will is, to come up with something a little bit more solid. I definitely agree with you that the 50,000 was too skinny. And when the initial RFP went out, that's kind of what we told them. And then the manager said, hey, if you guys want to do this right, we can find some additional monies. And so when the committee members asked for some component changes of the top selection getter, we also asked her, as I mentioned, to give us the updated budget amount. And that's why hers got closer to the 100 over the 50. So you're exactly right. A good piece of art with the natural stones in this case is going to cost more money. So that's how that came about.
Not to exclude water, but we may want no water as an option too.
Yeah, and she can pull that out of there, yeah. Well, hers doesn't lose the water. It's incorporated, and her option, as I recall, was to either allow it to be core drilled through these huge granite boulders, so it bubbles over the boulders, over part of the steel, and then down into the basin, which is a pondless system. I've got one at home that's kind of like that, so I know how they work. They work well, maintenance-wise. The other option was to go up higher, but she was worried about our concerns over splash in the area and maintenance on that. So again, the water component in her bid for the 80 is included, but for the actual connection, all the underground work, the design for the lighting, all that stuff is included.
And this core base that she designed is like a donut, so it's hollow in the middle where the water is. And then the solid piece can support 9,000 pounds. And so it's very unique and functional and works.
Do we like, as a council, the thought of having two pieces that reflect, I don't use the word reflect too much, but reflect one another at the entranceway, because that is a decision point, right? So if you want the column height so it can be seen by passersby, create an entrance of interest into the Colonial Plaza. That's kind of a decision point for these people in terms of, quote, a theme or a structure. So that would be decision number one, in addition to the budget not to exceed 100 grand and inclusion or non-inclusion of a water component, right? We need to get, I know we're taking some time, but we've all indicated this is important, so we gotta do it or not do it.
Mr. Simpson?
Me again. I agree with everything the deputy mayor said, except I have just one question. Let's say we do everything he said. How is that discussion going to be any different than the one we just had tonight? When we all agree that the premise is there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different views of art up here. So this is my point, Jason. We tasked the Art Commission. We gave them a task. And I think we have to respect that task. We have to respect that process. Now, I'm all in favor of the 100,000. I'd even go a little higher if we have to. But I think we owe it to that commission. They made a decision. And while I'm, like I say, and I've had this discussion with the city manager, while I mean, I know we have the ability to turn things around here. I think when we ask of people to make a decision, we should honor that decision. And they made a decision. And if we don't have a good reason, we have 7 reasons. If we don't have a good reason to overturn it, then I don't think we should. Thank you.
I'd respectfully disagree. We ask them to make a recommendation, which is different than a decision. And we're elected to make the decisions on behalf of the community, which may have a wider range of interests and opinions than an appointed committee. So you can't sidestep the responsibility of saying no sometimes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to speak to the deputy mayor's summation to try to get us to a consensus. You know, I think we decide we want a water feature or we don't. Okay, you know that if we have a budget, we want it to comply with the budget. And yes, we want something to be durable and be able to be maintained, to be able to go and do that. And so I think that as we move forward with the process, that the question of those 3 items are not necessarily things that should be scored. It's either inside the budget or it's not. It isn't like, well, it's close to the budget, or, I mean, I don't know whether you get 0 or it was worth 5 points in this particular thing. And I don't know, you know, out of 550 possible points, okay, we had one that got 300 and something, one that got 200 and something, one that got, but I don't know if they got their points for durability or if they got, but what I would like the Arts Commission to sort of make those things more check blocks. It's within the budget. It's durable enough that the city will be able to maintain it and it will stay a period of time. And then score it on aesthetics and relatability and theme, and let's choose something with that to where you can't overcome deficiencies or a weakness, I won't call them a weakness in the aesthetics and by just making it durable and the fact that you got some things that are you've checked some blocks that generate points in a competitive way. So in addition to doing that, I'd just like them to just sort of relook their scoring rubric so that we're really scoring the artistic elements and have minimum standards for the others.
There's no objection. I'd task Deputy Mayor Whalen with coming up with that, the $100,000, slightly more defined water feature, in or out, what Mr. Branstetter said, option.
Okay, so if I have,
And come back to us next meeting and we can
maybe we can
decide
ask-
whether to move forward on
Okay,
that.
we can ask for some other updated opportunities. One thing I'd suggest we do, we've got the Arts Commissions, after we get through this process, hopefully before November, we do have a joint meeting with the Arts Commission, I think in October, November.
October.
What I would really recommend we do in preparation for that, and the Arts Commission should make that part of the work plan. We went through a public art policy, as some of you may remember, with Dennis Higashiyama and the Arts Commission at the time, and it was presented, proposed, and I thought adopted, but apparently not, because either the city manager nor Ms. Martinez can find an ordinance that apparently adopted that. But if it hasn't been, it should be. And I hear a good point that perhaps as part of that public arts policy that we ultimately adopt, there should be a better scoring rubric that is generic enough that can be used for future public art pieces, that has, if it's a component of the objective of council, that's like a check the box. But the points, we can decide how the points should be allocated toward the theme and enhance that. So I'll ask them to make a recommendation on a better rubric for you and include that in the public arts policy that I think should be part of the work plan at the end of the year and adopted ultimately by us.
I think part of kind of to carry that to an absurd example, if you had a 500-point system that gave 50 points for durability and something scored 0,
Right.
and it had 400 points on the other 450, you wouldn't want to pick it.
Right. So it should be a done deal that it's durable, meets that standard, the objective. It should be given that it meets the budget, and so the other components we should probably flex with.
Personally, I don't really see, I see durability as a requirement,
Yeah, it's a
not
given.
an element of the quality of the art.
Yep, I get it.
And that rubric was formed from looking at other cities' rubrics and what they do, not just from our past one with the Lotus Blossom. And I think that is why it worked well, that the top 3 artists did have the durability and did have the other components that were needed for, a top scoring
Okay.
functional.
So I will get back with Sally then, and as long as you give me leave to work with him a little bit, to come back with some options, I'll do it.
You'll come back? Okay, great. That direction.
We've already
Thank you,
blown
Ms. Martinez.
you.
And waiting patiently, we have Andrew Nidens, Executive Director of South Sound 911, to give us an update on potential governance change.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's, I very much appreciated the opportunity early April last month to provide a presentation to the council about the proposed changes in governance. So I won't repeat that presentation, but to summarize, if I may, the proposed change in governance comes after 6 years that we've operated under the present form. The intent is to provide a more streamlined process, if you will, taking what is now 2 boards of directors, one an operations board of 15 members, and then an elected policy board, a policy board of elected officials of 10 members, and to create an 11-member single board of directors representing elected officials from both cities and towns, from Pierce County government, as well as from fire districts. And so to have a more representative form of governance, to provide a more authoritative and autonomous structure under state law as a PDA or a public authority, if you will, which is more substantive than the interlocal agreement structure under which we operate now, is the intent. Such a structure will allow Southtown 911 on behalf of not just the 6 founding governments, but all 41 of the police and fire agencies that we serve, to take on more of our own liability, to be able to incur debt, not right now, but at some point in the future, and to be able to own assets and properties in a more clear-cut fashion. So I think the memo in your packet from city attorney and city manager really sums it up pretty well in terms of law enforcement and fire, county, city, and fire district. And actually, the concluding sentence of the memo says the PDA harmonizes member oversight with increased independence, which is almost poetic in terms of the sentence, but I think it really summarizes well what it is we're trying to do. Now that we're 6 years old, it's not as though we're broken, but I think there's a strong desire on the part of the 6 founding governments, which certainly includes the city of Lakewood, to see moving forward in a more clear-cut fashion as a public authority, to be chartered by the city of Tacoma, but to have representation, as I mentioned, covering all the governments, and to have a more representative format so that governments who are not represented today, such as Central Pierce, which is the largest fire district in the county, would be at the table. The city of Bonnie Lake, which is a large city, which is not at the table today, would be at the table. So it provides a more balanced approach to who actually sits at the table of governance. Certainly, City of Lakewood will continue at that seat of governance, which has certainly been a good factor, I believe, for City of Lakewood since the start. And the West Pierce Fire District, which is certainly close to the City of Lakewood, would continue in its authoritative form as well. So this governance, which it may be coincidental that our board of directors has had every one of its meetings in the City of Lakewood since it started, but I think it's symbolic of the relationship we have with the Lakewood community, and I believe this structure will allow us to continue in the future. So that's a bit of a long-winded summary to the presentation that I wasn't going to give, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that council members may have. And maybe I preempted, I don't know if the city manager was wanting to say something.
Questions for Mr. Nidetz?
I was going to ask him about the public art at the new building, but I thought I better not do that. Yeah.
Well, as soon as you approve the governance, we'll show you the public art.
Yeah, all the fire unions are going to weigh in on the water feature.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would notice, having participated in this process, that this proposal doesn't vest Lakewood with a spot. It is more democratic in that the allocation is largely of board of directors seats is largely dependent upon the volume of business, so that those who pay the most can potentially change. That's why, Bonnie Lake may be a city of 75,000 someday, and they would be entitled to a greater representation than someone else. So that kind of the governance is fixed, but the parties may change, and then there's a rotation on some of the smaller communities. Is it Fife and
Right.
Bonnie Lake and Sumner right now?
Yeah, the model of governance calls for the first 2 to have 2 seats apiece, which would be Pierce County and Tacoma. The next 2 to have 1 seat apiece, which is City of Lakewood and City of Puyallup. And with all due respect what the mayor just said, I think Lakewood is destined to be the second largest city for quite some time. And then the 5th, 6th, and 7th cities share 2 seats. So there's a rotation between Fife, Bonnie Lake, and Sumner. And the 3 cities have already come together and figured out how to do the rotation. And then after that, there's well, there's a small cities representation through that same sharing in terms of a liaison role. And then there are 3 fire district seats, which is a change from what we have today, but one that certainly is satisfactory to the fire district.
So the fire districts are fairly large customers.
Yes.
And currently, under the hybrid governance model where there's an ops board that has governance authorities, which is quite kind of unusual, fire is represented in 50% of that. And so that there won't be an ops board with governance powers. It will have advisory powers. And so fire kind of steps up to some extent with respect to its representation on the board. Some of the logic of that is historically the most important thing at formation, this was handled particularly well, was the transition, and police and fire officials were justifiably concerned that call taking not literally wouldn't get dropped in the handoff, and so it was more important to be involved for the operations board. And now that things are consolidated, co-managed, that's become less of a concern, and technical changes are more important. Mr. Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first largest would be Tacoma, and that includes police and fire because they're separate from the fire districts. So when you're down below here on page 71 where it says, as among fire district contract agencies, and there's 3, those are only the fire districts themselves, not this. I guess Tacoma's really the only city anymore with its own fire department. Do they go in the city one, or do they go in the fire district?
No, they're in a city one.
Okay, so they go as 1, Pierce County goes as 2, or thereabouts?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
That's one other comment. The mayor mentioned the role of the operations board today as it becomes an advisory committee in the future. And if I didn't clearly point this out at the last presentation, under the present structure, the operations board is not just one other board. It's actually a fairly authoritative board in that it has hiring and firing authority over the executive director. And so under this model of the proposed model, it would be the 11-member board of directors representing the elected officials that would clearly play that role. And the police and fire chiefs have been an instrumental part of our development, and they will continue on to guide the agency, but they will not play as much of a governance role as they do today. The mayor also mentioned his role, and I just want to remind you that the proposal before you is not the South Sound executive director's presentation. It is my presentation. It's not my proposal. Essentially, the 6 founding entities, City of Lakewood, Pierce County, Tacoma, Fife, West Pierce, and Puyallup actually came together. So the 6 executive representatives, including your city manager here, were part of a discussion over quite a few months that led to a consensus about this proposal. So this is very much an interlocal proposal.
There are also, going back to the beginning of your presentation, there are some important differences with PDA. First one is it actually is a corporate entity, so it does present some liability shield for the individual customers. Everybody would be a customer of the entity and would not be in that owner capacity where potential for pass-through liability exists. Mr. Nidens, it mentioned the ability to incur debt, although that's not immediately anticipated right now under the ILA. The ability to incur debt doesn't exist, and also would clarify the ability to own real property. There are some certain provisions in the ILA statute that hoops that have to be jumped through for an ILA to own real property. It's questionable at best whether the current ILA satisfies those conditions. So
I would also be remiss if I didn't point out that Mr. Branstetter has been one of our founding policy board members over the last 6 years and has played an active role. So the city of Lakewood has clearly been represented in a number of ways.
So maybe you could bring the members here up, or council members up to speed on the proposed timeline now, what you're looking at for moving forward?
Certainly. Of the 6 governments, the process is moving forward fairly quickly. The city of Fife has already approved it. West Pierce is scheduled for early June. Puyallup is scheduled for middle June. We haven't, I don't know the date off the top of my head. City of Tacoma is scheduled for June 24th. And Pierce County, I believe, will be the very first week of July. So I anticipate that roughly by the first week of July, we will have action on the interlocal agreement by all 6 of the entities, and then approval of the charter by the Tacoma City Council the very first week of July, since they'll do that in 2 steps. So here we are, almost June 1st, and between now and I'd say over the next 5 weeks, we're going to see a lot of discussion by your colleagues in those other 5 governments. And quite honestly, in the briefings that I've done to the other governments, with the exception of Tacoma, the response has been very positive. There have been a lot of questions, but I think the questions have been answered. So I'm not seeing a lot of concern or resistance in terms of moving this forward. And when I say City of Tacoma, I wasn't meaning to suggest that there's opposition there, but we've not quite gotten to the council in that discussion.
Mr. Ranstetter.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to tell the rest of my council members that I appreciate that getting some credit having been worked on the policy board here. I would tell you that it is at times been awkward of where something comes up and I and others on the policy board are asked to do things that ultimately we're going to have to come back to full councils in the different cities in that to resolve or do. And some of those things never made their way back, and it's created some problems, such as the method of financing for the new communications center in the current ILA never got back to get worked out, although we're doing workarounds with that to do that. But the other thing I guess I would point out to this is that we are at the point of where the resolution that we're passing saying is that we agree we should make this change, and we agree that we'll accept a charter as passed by the Tacoma City Council. There's also a provision in there that says that if they don't pass a charter by the end of this year, then the whole process is over, and we just continue to march as we're doing. So we're going through to do that. And then I had one question that I guess I'd address to the city attorney. It's kind of awkward that we have a resolution with an Appendix A, and Appendix A has an Appendix A. Is there some way that we could insert some language that clarifies that in some way, maybe before we look at this next week?
We will figure out a way to make that more clear. It's typical for us to label something as an Appendix A for the council, and it may just be that second Appendix A was the only appendix in existence for what we've now labeled Appendix A. But I think it could be more clear, so we'll look at that.
I think that what's happened is we have Appendix A, which is the interlocal agreement that was sent to us as a draft that we're seeking to authorize the city manager to sign. And that draft has an Appendix A, which is a draft of the charter that we're expecting to be the basis for what the city of Tacoma does.
Right. We'll fix it so that it's clear for the legislative record.
Okay.
And I think there was an effort to have Ms. Gregory of the Pacifica Law Group help draft ordinances that were consistent, or
Yes,
proposed
that-
ordinance, so that people aren't, individual city attorneys and county prosecutors and fire district attorneys aren't taking their own crack at the resolution, that everybody was passing the same thing, so it was consistent.
Yeah, that's very true. Deanna Gregory from Pacifica, who I believe is your bond counsel as well, is playing an active role in doing just that. She's agreed to coordinate among all 6 so that each council is dealing with the same documents going forward.
So maybe we can have, maybe she'd label that second one Exhibit A, or Appendix A, and we can call ours it Exhibit 1, incorporate here by reference or something. So, right, any other questions for Mr. Neiditz? So this is up for consideration next meeting, is that correct? That is correct, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have a review of a contract for services with the town of Stillicum regarding electrical services. Distribution. I didn't know we had an electric utility, but.
What we have is we have a problem with streetlights. The town of Stillicum is willing to help us out. We have over 4,000 streetlights, and a fair number of them are unmetered. We do not have the staff capability, resources, or equipment or certifications to take care of those lights when they burn out, need to be replaced. What has been happening in the past is a little bit of amalgamation of different efforts, but primarily where we are now is we put out a contract and we have a contractor come in and replace them. What that means is that we try to amass a certain number of them to make it economic for the contractor and us to do so. That means that we replace them anywhere from every 6 to 12 months or sometimes even longer depending on how they're burning out. And what we have approached the town of Stillicum is they have the equipment, they have the certified linemen, and they have the ability to do what we would like to do. And they have said, yeah, we have an electric utility. All of our lines are underground. So our linemen aren't fully utilized the way we would like them to. They have a very good price structure for us where we would pay the linemen about $63 an hour is what we pay the town of Stillicum. And that is an absolute screaming deal for us, to be honest with you. And then a 15% surcharge on administrative services. We've estimated about 20 a year, so they have an idea of the quantity. In my conversations with their public works director, we have laid out a plan by which we would give them the locations on a monthly basis of the ones that burn out. They would go evaluate them, make sure that they've got all the skills, resources, and equipment to do those particular locations. We would set up the traffic control for them because we have the experts and the capability to do so and equipment. And then when they say, yeah, we can do that, we get everything set up. So potentially a month later, the work would be done. So instead of waiting 6, 9, 12 months or longer to get these lights, burned out lights taken care of, we're now going to be able to give the community a higher level of service and get these lights burnt out lights, replaced in about 60 days. Now, my goal personally is to see if we can eventually get to the point where when they burn out, within a month's time or sooner, that they're replaced. Because I think one of the things that a community looks for is it's the appearance, the aesthetics of the community, and burned out streetlights don't look very good when you're going down the road and you're seeing burned out light, burned out light, burned out light. So this is a level of service we're striving to attain.
Mr. Whalen.
So of the metered versus unmetered, and as I understand that term, metered means someone's got the ability to read it to send a bill, right?
It does, but it also means that they have a way to disconnect the light. They pull the meter so there's no current flowing. An unmetered one, we pay a flat rate, whether it be to Lakeview or PSE or Tacoma, and there's no ability to disconnect it where the state labor and industries will say, yes, it's safe. Now your folks who are electrical or electricians in nature but not certified linemen can work on it. That's the challenge.
So of those that are, we're talking about unmetered in this case, right?
We're
Going
talking
with
about
the unmetered ones? How
metered
many of
ones.
those have been switched to LEDs? Because I thought that was part of the whole process, to get these things to burn longer, be more efficient, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, they're all LEDs.
And they're still burning out?
Yeah,
once every 6 years?
The LEDs have an average life of 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
We are in the process of doing an evaluation to figure out what is this bubble we have coming towards us.
Okay.
Because there was a mass conversion of streetlights to LEDs, and the burnout rate that we've been seeing has been relatively low. But the concern is as they age out, we're going to start seeing more of them, more and more of them failing. So we're starting to do that assessment now, and to be able to come back to you and tell you what we are going to predict as our need for replacing lights, whether they are metered or unmetered in future years.
Okay. And you've anticipated we're going to replace 20, or approximately 20 a year for the $75,000 contract?
The 20 a year was our estimate based on historical practice. The 75,000 was strictly a placeholder. I can't tell you that we're going to use all 75,000, but it is budgeted funds already. But it's a way, like we did with Pierce County, where we set it up to 250, so that we have at least some place to work within that limit.
So it's a line item, we're not giving them a flat $75,000 fee regardless of...
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It is for time and materials.
Got it.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thanks. So PSC, just as a matter of their business practices, they do their own? Or do they
PSCs
charge us?
The PSC is the only one that they actually will replace the burned out ones under the contract we have with them.
Under the
Tacoma,
franchise agreement, or?
Not on the franchise, but under the contract we
Okay.
have with them for streetlights. We pay them for the streetlights, not the electricity, but also the replacement, repair of them. But the other two, we do not. They will not do it. It's entirely our responsibility.
So does this include the lights that get knocked down every year? Because apparently we have a fair number that cars hit and take them out. That was mentioned, I thought, in here. Does that include that, or are we still going to go with contractors to do that?
More than likely, we will go with the contractors, at least for the first year, because that requires the purchase of the material, the poles, the arms, and a lot more. But if we're successful in doing this body of work, then I would like to explore whether Stilicum is willing to work with us for doing those knockdown repairs.
Okay.
In order to achieve your goal of being able to get a burned out light working within 30 days in the long term, are we going to have to internally train people or bring on linemen?
No. Linemen are becoming harder and harder, even for the electric utilities, to hire. In fact, a lot of them are hiring and starting their own apprentice programs. It takes 3 to 4 years to go through that kind of a process to get trained and certified. I don't know that we would be able to, with what we have, be able to afford to hire linemen. I talked to different individuals, Tacoma Public Utilities, Town of Stilicum. TPU is having problems because the linemen can go down to California and earn $300,000 a year. So that's what they're doing. And so even TPU, which is a major utility, as we all know, is having a hard time getting qualified people, already linemen, but they're training up their own. So I don't anticipate a time when the city would be doing that.
So what would be our strategy moving from this agreement with Stilicum, which puts us in a 60 to 75-day window, to move towards a sub-30-day window at some time in the future? What do we have to do?
So there are two different types of repairs, one of which is on a metered service, one of which is on unmetered. This is for the unmetered. For the metered services, I think that our operations staff does a pretty good job replacing the burned out lights. I can't tell you exactly how soon they do it, but it's something I want to work with Mary Dosworthy on and Scott Williams to find out their turnover rate, how fast they can get them done. With the town of Stilicum, what we have spoken about is, if I give them to you in the first month, you do your assessment, you do the work the next month. And that was, yeah, we can do that. That was very acceptable. As we get more proficient at this and they become comfortable with our system and the types of repairs that they would be doing for us, my target would be to work with them to drive our time down so it's even sooner. In a bigger perspective, I'd like to see us eventually get to where all of our lights are now metered so that we can do the work internally and not have to rely on others. I think that's a really big ask because we have thousands of unmetered lights. So that would be a long-term goal.
Thank you.
So overly simplified for us that are better with hammers than wire cutters. An unmetered light is hardwired in. Is that the main difference? It sounds like on a metered light, you can just pull the meter and there's a minimal amount of training to change the bulb. But if there's not a meter there, there's no way to interrupt the current.
Yeah, exactly. The meter is just like the meter on the outside of your house. The electrician comes in, snips the little wire that the utility companies require you to go on there, that little lock, if you will, to show someone's messed with it. You can pull the meter out. There's no current flow. You can work on your entire electrical system. If your house was unmetered, you wouldn't have the ability to pull that. And so you would have to have a circuit breaker like you do inside to do that work. You can do that as an electrician and around your house, but you can't do that with the street lights because the voltage is too high. So if you do that and you do something wrong, it'll kill you. No, it's not good.
Any other questions? Well, it sounds more service for no more money. If you can come up with other initiatives like that, we'll be sure to endorse them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I wouldn't be able to sprint through. You can take a break. We'll come back and talk about image. We now move to a review of Lakewood imaging campaign development with Ms. Newton and Ms. Grimley. It's like, I always agree with myself. You're stuck here. You don't have a restraining order, do you? She's a great lady.
She is. Would you like me to wait for the deputy mayor?
Well, you can wait a minute or two here. You can applaud when he comes back.
I'll go fast. I'm gonna introduce him in
He
a
said,
minute.
take a minute.
She said, take a minute here. Well,
Yeah, I'm taking a minute. I'm stretching
we
my
got-
legs out. We're gonna welcome our guests. That's you guys. Ignore him or her.
Yes. I was gonna give him a formal introduction. Okay. I think we're. Okay, don't take it personally. Okay, are we ready? You ready for me to, we got everybody, it looks like.
got everybody. All right,
Okay.
you're on.
Well, thank you all for hearing us again this evening. As you know, we were here about a month ago and presented to you the latest with our imaging campaign. And before I launch too far into this, I wanted to first bring attention to our guests that we have here in the audience, we have Adam Welch and Paul Boyer, and Adam is the president of Hemisphere, and Paul is the strategist, and they are the two that we've been working closely with on this, and Adam is also a Lakewood resident. So this is something that he's got a passion for as well because he lives here. So, and we've obviously very much seen that in the connection that he's had with the campaign as they've unrolled the information for us. So without further ado, we'll jump into this. And the first part of this is going to be a bit of a rehash for you, just to kind of remind you where we were from a month ago. As you know, we had the tagline and anthem that were proposed for us, and Build Your Better Here is the one that we were recommending moving forward with. So after the meeting that we had with you on April 22nd, we went back to Paul and Adam and we let them know that we wanted to talk about the next steps and what does that look like. So they created for us a proposal for what that would look like to execute the campaign, and this is an all-encompassing, so we'll be going through that tonight, proposal that includes the costs associated with not only creating the content, but also proposed ad spends, what that looks like, and then also them being the managers of that campaign. So when you're looking at this, this is an all-inclusive package. So as this says too, you know, part of that is being a good partner with us, and we've certainly seen that so far. They've really listened to us, and they've made changes when we've requested them. They've come up with ideas, and we've had a really good back and forth, and that's how we would envision this going forward. So quick refresh on the strategy. The idea is, you remember we had our personas, so our starters, our builders, our warriors, our long-termers. Those are the 4 people, so to speak, people that we're trying to reach. So for the next year, the idea is to roll out and introduce this brand message, convert those long-term personas to being our brand ambassadors, helping those who are looking to come into the area, learn about us, and come here to make Lakewood their home. And then really reaching out to those builders, those business folks who are looking to find the right home and let them know that Lakewood is the right home for them. And then going forward, just continuing to fine tune that based on the feedback that we're getting, the results that we're seeing. So we try to take a look at what that value and impact is, and obviously to a degree, it's gonna be a bit anecdotal. It's hard, you can't, you know, measure everything specifically, but we tried to do our best to kind of give you an idea of, you know, distribution and warehousing, manufacturing, restaurant, family fun center, housing. These are some of the areas that we're trying to target for economic development and for growing the city. And this just gives you a sense of what that looks like, breaking it down by employment numbers, labor income, just to kind of get a sense of this is what we're trying to attract and this is what it looks like if we bring them in. And so one of the ways that we will do this, and we'll go into this a little bit further in the presentation, is looking at clicks on digital ads as well as on landing pages that will be created specifically that will be tied to our advertisement. So we'll know, okay, that person saw the ad and they clicked through and they went to our landing page. So the idea is that if it's not necessarily doing as well as we hope, we can refine that and we can tweak it a little bit. Sometimes we call it the kind of the beta testing. So, okay, that didn't work. Let's try, you know, this side, see if this works better. And for proposal for going forward, this is what we're looking at is advertising on Facebook, Instagram ads, LinkedIn, Google ads, and YouTube. And this is all just right now, the digital side, this is what we'd be targeting. And we'd be able to measure the success of those based on the views, the total number of times the ads are seen, then the next level down, how many people click through to go to the landing pages, and then actions. So if those landing pages have, you know, let's say it's for economic development, they have Becky's contact information. How many people go so far as to call Becky? Or if there's a fillable form, go and fill out the form and request more information. So that'll allow us to get a sense of how successful is it, and then what leads might come from that for us to be able to bring in, from a business standpoint, you know, new businesses or on that front, basically from an economic development standpoint. So as I've mentioned a couple times, we have the landing pages. So these would be dedicated pages that are going to track the success of your campaign. And these would be set up, which we can actually set them up on our own website, hopefully. So they would allow us to track folks, but they're going to, you know, they can mirror our website, but they're going to be a little bit different in that they're not going to have the full navigation because we want to keep people on the pages. And that's something that would be developed for us around the campaign. And then also the idea too around doing the brand awareness and completing surveys to see how many people are seeing your message and what effect is it having. Are we helping to change that perception that we're wanting to change? So the proposal that Hemisphere has put forward is to allocate about 75% of the advertising budget on digital, and then 25% on print ads. And I think we'd be selective which with ads with the print ads that we do, and that print is very expensive. And so if we're going to be spending money on print, we want to make sure it's actually going to people who really are going to come and contact us. So from an economic development front, there are trade publications, there's print that way that are going to people that specifically are subscribing because they are interested in finding a new location for their business, or that's their line of work. And so that's kind of the idea of what we'd be targeting if we were to do that from an economic development standpoint. So the first phase of this is obviously, okay, we know where we want to put this information, but now we need to develop it. And what does that look like? So obviously videos and photography are a big part of that because we need the imagery and we need to have that professional message that we're getting out there. And so this is where we get into talking about how does that get prioritized, and obviously capitalizing right now on our beautiful weather. We've got Summerfest coming up as well, our farmers market, so some really good opportunities to show some of the things that we do here that also are very visually stimulating. So what that looks like is, this is kind of, they outlined for us, here's what it looks like, here's what we would do, and here's the process for how we'd go through it. So the campaign branding, designing up to 3 black and white concepts, and then reviewing those initial ones, getting our feedback, going forward from there, and then refining up to 2 of those concepts, and then designing up to 3 full color options, again, reviewing, adjusting, and finalizing those. We would then get all of that content in the format that works best for us. So from a digital standpoint, using the different file types, so you can see PDF, EPS, PNG, creating the style guide, which I think is something that is really important, not only just for obviously wanting all of our advertising to look the same, but frankly, this is stuff that we can use here in-house so that all of our flyers that go out or all of our Facebook ads that go out use the same fonts. It looks the same. It just kind of creates that cohesion, and you want everything to, you want to be able to be creative, but you also want to have a line of consistency as well. And then creating those social media templates, and then also like a brochure or a rack card. So I use this example just because I used to use the ferry all the time, but if you go on one of our ferries, which are our #1 tourist destination in the state, they've got the racks where you can go and you can pick up, Port Angeles, Port Townsend, you can pick up all these flyers. Well, something like that, the rack card that you can put somewhere and then visitors can see and pick up. So that idea for those. And then obviously something that we talked a lot about was the video. So this breaks down what that looks like from pre-production to the final. So the final result of all the work will be 1 full-length brand anthem video. So that would be similar to like the Chrysler video that we showed, that idea, and then a 30-second one as well. So a little bit shorter one because you're gonna have different platforms where you may not wanna have a minute video, you wanna have a shorter, quicker one. And that will allow us to put those forward. So example, if you're watching YouTube and you go to watch something and then the ad comes up before, that would be the idea. You could put it in that spot. Maybe you do a 30-second one there. Kind of the different variables for how you can use it. So you can see here the pre-production start. We would basically sit down with them and look at the different concepts, create a script, so we would know this is what we're gonna be shooting, filming. We can do up to 3 revisions of that script, and then recruit the actors. So it gives you a breakdown of costs for the actors, acquiring a voice talent, and then a shot list. So we know this is what we want to go shoot, this is what we want to do. So that would be example like the drone footage as well that we talked about. And then production would be up to 2 filming days. You would have live video and then candid photography with 2 shooters, up to 1 full day of drone footage. to allow us to get those shots, you know, over the lakes, over the parks, that type of idea, recording the voice talent. And then once all that is generated, then we get to go through into the post-production process, and it lists out all the different things that would be included with that, as well as the opportunity to be editing and reviewing rough cuts of the video. So we will see it and have input on it before it's finished. And then in addition, we'll also get some of the photography as well. And so I kind of view these as like the evergreen shots. So these are images that we can be using in addition to the ad campaign just elsewhere, you know, whether that's on just other Facebook posts or on our website. So that kind of idea of again, you're replicating the image across multiple platforms to hit as many people as possible. So again, this kind of just looks at the digital marketing side of things, because that is where the majority of our advertising budget is going to go to. It just takes a look at who are you going to target and where. So for example, on the digital ads for Facebook, you would be targeting the long-termers. Instagram, you're going to get those starters. The LinkedIn, if you were to do sponsored content, you'd be targeting the builders, the folks that are in the more the business community, they're looking to come in. Google Ads, the mayor brought this up, I think, at the last presentation, you know, trying to target those folks that are looking to move. So going outside of the state of Washington and targeting the folks that are living potentially around military bases that are going to be transferred here or looking to come here, and they type in, you know, where to live around Joint Base Lewis McChord or whatever, you know, we would come up with those target words and then do the Google AdSense around that so that Lakewood comes up when they do those searches. And then also the YouTube ads. And again, this would send everybody back to the landing pages, so we would be able to have an idea of what type of impact are we having and is this being successful. And this just, again, goes into just ways that we can see the success of what we're doing and allow us to. The nice thing about digital is if it's not working, you can change it. You don't have to go, oh, well, it's running in print now for the next month and I can't change it, you know, so we can have a very quick response and change time on that. This is the schedule. So this is the idea being we would get going right away, obviously capitalizing on our nice weather, as well as as we mentioned, Summerfest. They're well aware of that event and the desire to get some imagery from that. And then it just goes through what it looks like. Included also with the management would be quarterly email blasts that would go out as well. So those would target audiences. And then we would be getting monthly reports back on the successes of those, as well as a more in-depth campaign management report once every quarter that would let us see the successes or how things are going with the campaign. So it'd be very hands-on, and we'd be getting information on a regular basis to see how it's all working. And then here is the budget. So we asked them to break it down so you could see the cost of everything to get a sense of how it all adds up. And it breaks down to the video, as well as, for example, we mentioned, you know, some desires on having the professional music going in versus like having local artists perform it. So we asked for that range to show you just the different costs that can be associated with that. And then the ongoing costs, so this includes proposed monthly spend on digital advertising, and then what that would cost to manage it and track it and report back on it. And then it goes out through the end of 2020, just to give us a sense of what it would look like if we were to start now through the end of next year. And we felt that this was the best value for the money, and also the best way to execute the campaign within its first year. So I know I sped through that, just trying to respect everyone's time. So if you have any questions, both myself or Becky would be happy to answer, or obviously we have
Questions
admin
for
call.
Ms. Grimley?
Yeah.
Mr. Simpson? Oh, you were leaning forward, reaching for the mic.
I thought I caught. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's Jeffrey. And thank you, you guys. I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I have one question. This'll work. I have no doubt. For how long? You mentioned, you said right here, I wrote it down, it's hard to measure success. Now, you can get the clicks, you can track those, what I call, I'm used to them as Google Analytics. Has this been done in other cities and has it worked for them? What is the empirical data that supports this?
Would you like to answer that based on your? I'll give it a shot. Here, I'll let Adam answer just because he's the expert. Here, you go ahead.
So that was the thing that we spent a lot of time thinking about was early in the presentation you saw sort of what the larger economic impact could be. And the question is, how do we talk to those people? So I don't think we can make a straight line between somebody seeing an ad and you getting $1 million in revenue. We do feel very confident in drawing a straight line between this exposure and putting a campaign out into the world and measuring if people were able to see that. So there was the brand awareness surveys. So seeing over a year, 2 years, 3 years, have you heard of this campaign? Are you familiar with what it's doing? So I don't think we can tie it to dollars, but we can tie it to sort of influence and awareness. Do you have a different answer? Okay, we agree.
Now, about that music.
Yeah.
I thought we had this discussion.
I'll yield my chair.
It's Van Halen, the Stones, and ZZ Top. I don't want to hear anything about from Boston or Led Zeppelin, because the city manager wants that, but I just thought I'd.
And candidly,
You could, yeah, come on up.
Yeah.
So candidly, your wish list is an awesome wish list, and we didn't stretch that high. We didn't stretch to the like Van Halen. I mean, we can do the kicks,
Yeah.
but we didn't stretch the budget that far.
Quick question. Mr. Whalen. I think it's great, you know, as a guy who's been involved in marketing for law firms for a number of years, I know that there's a significant investment. The question that I just want us to make sure we're pretty globally clear on is we talk about this being a compelling campaign, and I want to know what's compelling it, just to make sure we're all on board. Are we trying to really overcome a perception that historically that we've quote unquote suffered from, or is that a component of a larger objective, the 30,000 foot level, where we're trying to take the market and saying, take a second look at Lakewood. You may not know who we are today.
I'll answer that, and then I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I'll call myself a bit of an outsider in that I came in from the journalism profession. And not only that, but I came in outside of Pierce County. So when I came into Pierce County, I was coming from a separate county, and you know, one of the first things the photographer said to me at the paper I was leaving was, "Don't get shot." And I was like, what is he talking about? You know, and so I'm coming to my council meetings late at night, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was like, yeah, what is he talking about? He doesn't know Lakewood at all. And so, you know, I've seen that, but I think that something that we really need to focus on now that we're past our 20th anniversary is who is or what is Lakewood of the future. So yes, we're overcoming a stereotype that's no longer, it's just wrong, but we kind of have to ourselves get past that and look at who we are. Well, we know who we are, but we need everybody else to know that. And so I think this is really the drive, the going forward, the call to action, this is who we are, and we want you to join us to be a part of this great city that we are. And I think that that's part of why this tagline really hit home with a lot of folks, is because we're not looking at what has happened in the past. We're not going to forget it because that's shaped us to be who we are going forward, but we're now ready to basically say to everybody, come on in, it's great here, and see why all these people are here and they love it here.
It's a good opportunity, I think, timing-wise, to do this refreshing of who we are. You know, we all saw the news article about Tacoma being the hottest housing market in the country right now, and so people are taking a second look at what's going on in the South Sound because of economic pressures up north, which is great for us. And it's a matter of capturing that opportunity to provide, attractive, visually engaging content with substance, which we have, we think we have anyway. One little comment, which is fly specks in the pepper on the drone footage. I wonder if Austin could do some of that, because we've got this expensive drone equipment.
We had
We've
that
got
conversation.
Yeah.
And we, that's something we can look at. Because I said that exact same thing. My concern would be just making sure that we're getting the footage that we want to get.
I get it. Yeah.
Because yes, we have the pilot and we have the folks that can operate it, but we also need the visual eye of someone who knows, okay, we need to fly it at this level to get the exact shot. And
More
while we may
perception,
be able to do it, it might take longer versus someone who this is what they do every day.
Yeah, I
and
get
they
it. It's
can get
only a
it.
$1,500 deal, so not a huge deal.
But we had the same conversation. Mhm.
I appreciate it, though. I think it looks great.
So, to some extent, this is a one-size-fits-all deal. How do we, it's, pick on my suggestion, we want people to have a good impression of Lakewood if you're being transferred from Fort Bragg, or heaven forbid, you're escaping from Fort Polk. But it's that's obviously a different market than trying to, if you went back to your economic development slide, kind of the gold standard of economic development is getting a manufacturer. And so as I go back to Washington, D.C., when I'm driving through SeaTac, I see billboards trying to sell me marijuana. When I go onto the airplane, I get a magazine that has ads for luxury goods and high-end homes and vacations. And as I walk into the Pentagon, somebody's trying to sell me a Predator or a warship, because they actually have ads for that stuff. So I'm the same guy, but with different hats on along the way, I'm targeted very differently. How do we customize the target here?
Differentiate ourselves.
Or customize the message, I should say, for the individual targets.
And I'll speak a little bit to that, and then I'll let you guys certainly, as the experts, I mean, to a degree, obviously, that's part of why we crafted the personas. So we know, okay, we're gonna target the starters with housing and have your family here and family-friendly events. With the builders, you're gonna target, we've got great, startup spaces for you, or for manufacturers. Look at this great industrial land that we have. And then in that, with the digital marketing tools, you can target based on people's demographics.
So how many
based on their
messages
metrics.
are we gonna have?
Do you want to come speak to?
One theme, different messages?
So, good question. How many messages are we going to have? So we have one overarching message, but I can't honestly tell you how many, but we would have many messages that would essentially lead to that overarching message. So if you think of the landing place or the landing page as the place where the Build Your Better Here campaign sort of lives, the messages that are sending people there are very customized to the audience that we're talking to. So, and they're gonna change from month to month as we test them and we find out what's performing. So on social media, for instance, we're going to need to speak very directly to people's felt needs. So the message might be pretty simple, but then it's gonna lead to this kind of attractive marketing message in the landing page experience. Sometimes it'll be appropriate to use that tagline at the digital ad level as well, but oftentimes it won't.
So while the media changes, one thing in advertising that hasn't changed is the need for multiple impressions for one person to remember anything. How do we accomplish that? I mean, hitting the same person multiple times.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked that. So we do have retargeting built into the campaign. So that's one of the, when somebody comes to the landing page level, we have the opportunity to collect basically enough data on them that we can send ads back to them. So yeah, we can hit them multiple times, and we can be very precise about that in a way that it's hard to do in sort of print world.
And maybe this is more for Bryn. It appears that some of this is attracting people to the area, and you mentioned the rack cards. And put in an LTAC grant request for some of the expense for this?
We could, I mean, the hard thing with that becomes the tourism component and being able to quantify heads and beds. And to a degree, we're wanting people to have a permanent bed that their head goes in every night.
They have to come here to find the house, so.
Right, right. So yeah, so I think where possible, we certainly can put that into our application,
It's
definitely.
not unlike the chamber expense or investment we make every year through lodging tax. I was thinking, once we get this one-time money up and running, I was going to address your same question, Mayor. After this first year, the 2020 into 2021, maybe we consider an allocation, if appropriate, for lodging tax monies to keep this program fresh and renewed, because I do think it has a direct tourism-related impact.
Any other questions?
I like it.
Yep, sounds good. And if Councilmember Barth likes it, she thinks it will sell houses.
I concur, and I haven't had to worry
It
about
was
it at all.
It was
It's a good point.
unnecessary advice, but not bad advice. All right, thank you much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
So we now move, thank you much, looks good. Forge forward. Forge forward. We now move to reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Just a few updates. Just want to let you know we don't have any bites on salary commission members yet, so we're going to continue to advertise that. And certainly if you know of anybody who's interested in serving on that, point them to our website or to our city clerk. Earlier today, we did receive the permit to move forward with the alum treatment on Wahop Lake. So our Public Works Engineering Department is moving forward with the applicator that the city hired, and the council approved the contract back on April. So that's going forward. The American Lake Management District has been, well, actually the vote has been completed, and it was overwhelmingly positive. 154 people voted to form the Lake District, and 8 said no. So we will now move forward with an ordinance to actually create the district, and that'll be part of your next Monday evening meeting, as well as scheduling or actually holding the public hearing on the assessment rolls that would then be levied across all of the property owners. So that'll be coming forward as part of your meeting this coming Monday evening, June 3rd. Last, I think it was Tuesday morning or Wednesday, I think, Councilmember Moss, you were there, the Military Affairs, the Chamber's Military Affairs monthly meeting. The keynote speaker was Gold Star Mother. Actually, she heads up the Gold Star Mothers here in Washington State. And long story short, they're looking at creating monuments throughout the state, memorializing the loss of their children. And they're looking for a location here in the Puget Sound region. And so I hope the council doesn't mind, but I gave her my card and I says, we'd be more than happy to look at some locations here in our community, given our, of course, relationship with JBLM. But one of the things that she mentioned during her presentation was also having some connectivity to the tribes, and of course our relationship with the Nisqually tribes. So I'm hoping she'll get back to me here this week. If not, we will reach out to her, and hopefully we'll have some additional information to report to you on that. The one area that she pointed out that they don't want a monument is by a cemetery. So that was so just wanted to just let the council know, but hopefully more to follow. On that.
I actually looked for her both at JBLM and at Mountain View yesterday, and the woman who is the head of the region was there, but not the woman who, there are normally 2 chapters. There's one in Oregon and one in Washington for like a 5-state region, and the chapter president was there, but, excuse me, the chapter president wasn't there, the regional president was.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for doing that. I think as you all know, the NTSB held a board meeting a week ago, last Tuesday. It was about 4.5 or 5 hours long. First of all, I do want to commend Shannon Kelly Fong. She monitored the board meeting the whole time and prepared some good notes and such, though in the end, the NTSB did come out with a nice executive summary. In summary, they identified 53 findings and 26 recommendations. And the recommendations are across a wide range of areas to Sound Transit, WashDOT Rail, Amtrak, and the FRA. And I know we sent you an email with a link to that if you want to read all of that. I'm just going to cut to the chase. My recommendation would be for this body to consider a resolution, and I don't know what the exact word would be, but certainly strongly recommending that all of those agencies implement all of the recommendations identified by the NTSB, because at the end of the day, those 4 agencies do not have to abide by those recommendations. I would further recommend that we reach out to our neighbors and neighboring agencies, encourage them to do the same thing. One of the recommendations is actually to replace all of the trains themselves. And I read somewhere this weekend or this late last week that WashDOT Rail is already moving forward and doing that and expects to have them replaced by 2020 or 2023. I would argue that 5 years, yep, I would, 2025, that's right, thank you, Councilmember. I would argue that that's too long, just given the significance of the damage that was done with the derailment.
So maybe we can bounce that around now. I know Senator Oban has written to both the transportation chairs in the House and Senate asking for bipartisan, bicameral hearings and to place a hold on everything until all the recommendations are satisfied. He's forwarding me he had a press release and the request for that, and I don't know what the feelings are here. If we wanted to act quickly, we could have staff draft something up.
I don't think it hurts anything for us to say, you got to do all the recommendations. I mean, that should be our, I think that's a minimal ask, really. Not that they're going to do that entire amount, but I think it's good public policy to say if these guys came up with 27 findings, we support the recommendations that they have to.
And add to that, the bypass shouldn't be used until the recommendations are have been met. Or until we get a stop. Mr. Ransford.
Is there something that we could ask either the Pierce County or Puget Sound Regional Councils, since they're transportation entities and deal with, to add their voice to encourage implementation of any of those recommendations?
Certainly, we could reach out to those agencies. I wasn't thinking that far north, but certainly, Councilmember Branstetter, if it's the wish of this body, we could do that and ask for their. I wouldn't say we're asking for their support. I think we would be asking them to, say, to speak with one voice here in our region on this issue.
Support the recommendations. I think even that's a big ask with that group, given the denial that the transportation element of the PSRC was in after the accident. So, backpedaling briskly. They had the nastiest meeting. I don't know all the details, but the relationship with the board members is deteriorating. They had a very nasty meeting last week. They were having objections and calls for order and making motions, and it was, I guess, a real zoo.
Regarding this issue, Mayor?
No,
oh, okay.
But just it's devolving. So go ahead and have probably Mrs. Kelly Fong, given her familiarity. I too, I watched most of the findings. But the summary is pretty inclusive.
So, okay, we'll try to get that turned around as quickly as possible. So thank you for that. Another key initiative that we're working on, I think this body's aware of, is Title 18A. And so that's moving, it's an evolving project. You know, we're going to be having a third stakeholder meeting actually in 2 weeks from today on June 18th. I think it's 2 weeks from today, maybe it's 3 weeks. Here at City Hall at 11:30 a.m. And, you know, some other newer updates that we're incorporating into the proposal are, for example, SSMCP's latest recommendations regarding dark skies lighting and military influence area issues regarding our ACUs, you know, expanded definitions and things along those lines. And the next steps after this stakeholder meeting is to listen, you know, from feedback on what we hear from you know, folks who wish to participate in that, is that the Planning Commission will then get some kind of a final draft in mid-July, and they would look to have a public hearing and perhaps take action into August and early September. It would then become before this body about the middle to the latter part of September. And then, you know, if you're ready to take action, you could take action as soon as the latter part of November, or even early December. So just wanted to give you a heads up that is moving forward. It is one of our #1 priorities as it relates to, you know, code updates that we need to do. And I think, as you all are aware, this is something we're working on for several years. It's kind of getting sidetracked on a few occasions, but now we're all in. We're all in. So we want to try and get this done. Also wanted to let you know that Department of Ecology has accepted all of our shoreline management plan materials. This body passed an ordinance a couple of weeks ago, and so now Ecology will review that based on their standards, and I'm anticipating that we'll get a so-called clean bill of health on that, just given all the work and energy that went into that. So more to follow. As a follow-up from last Monday's evening meeting, our city clerk reached out to Lakes High School, and so the dance team will be here next week to be recognized, so thank you for that, Councilmember Moss. Also just want to, again, put a blurb in in support for the AWC annual conference over in Spokane, so if you have an opportunity to attend, I would certainly encourage you to do that, and if you need some help signing up, even if it's just a day or two, let us know. It's from Wednesday, June 26th through Friday, June 28th, but really the bulk of the activities kicks off at lunch at noon on Wednesday and really runs through Thursday afternoon. So for example, I'll be flying over late on Tuesday night and then flying back, you know, late on Thursday afternoon. So not for public dissemination, or at least releasing to the general public, but we did learn that our downtown sub-area plan has won the Governor's Smart Communities Award for Vision that went through the Department of Commerce. So congratulations to all of you. It was submitted. It's actually a big deal. It's very difficult they got some pretty, you know, intensive standards to adhere to. So it's a bit of an honor, and so just wanted to pass that on to you. And so the Governor's office just kind of gave us a courtesy heads up that it's coming. But then once they do their release, then we'll do our release to piggyback on that. Wards Lake Park expansion. So our Park and Rec Director, Mary Dodsworth, presented at Pierce County Conservation Futures, their advisory committee last week, to get in the queue for the next round of funding. And it's basically to acquire about 11 acres of property adjacent to Wards Lake Park, which is the property right behind where the cinema and all of that commercial property is. And so the total project cost is about $187,000, so I'm going to round up to $200,000 perhaps by the time we get around to it. And so we'll be requesting about $102,000 in conservation futures, and then the balance, the recommendation would become from city stormwater funds. And the purpose of that would be twofold. One is we're going through the Wards Lake master site planning process right now, and so having direct access and control over that property, I think, bodes well from the community. And then secondly, quite frankly, we have a lot of nonsense that occurs in that area. The good news is that the property owner is very, very good about getting on top of it and, you know, keeping the area as clean as possible. Though if it is part of the city, we can be a little bit more proactive than even they can. So that's kind of a secondary benefit for acquiring that property. So I'm sure Ms. Dosworth did a wonderful job in front of the committee, and I'm sure we'll do fine there. PSRC, the Puget Sound Regional Council, they had some contingency transportation funds available last week. They gave us literally a couple of hours to make a determination. Basically, they offered us, it was about $290,000 in support of our Gravelly Lake Drive project from Washington Boulevard to Pacific Highway or around to Nyanza. That's about a $3.4 million project. And so if we had accepted that money, it would have federalized the project, because right now the project is funded with all city monies. And it would have cost us at least that amount of money, if not more, to actually have to adhere to the federal requirements. So we graciously said thanks, and then it would add it onto the timeline. So we said thanks, but no thanks. Mr. Busich did request that if they could maybe allocate those monies to Stilichum Boulevard for right-of-way or something, and they said no, they had another project to go to, but I just wanted to let you know it was a bit of a last-minute item that came up. It was nice that they reached out to us, but it just wasn't cost-effective for us to do that. On the legislative front, you know, our team has been meeting and talking about, you know, updating our legislative agenda as we look out to next January. And I think as we've talked about, or at least I've talked about, has been the I-5 corridor from 48th and Tacoma all the way down to Mounts Road, and, you know, adding a 5th lane and having it be an HOV lane, which is, I think that's something we can get behind and support. But also doing it the right way, which would mean replacing interchanges, and it would get expensive. But let's do it right, and let's do it, you know, right the first time. And so we were talking internally, and you know, here's the good news. You know, we're working on connecting Tilichum and Woodbrook to Lakewood through, you know, a pedestrian bike trail and through dedicated lanes along the I-5 corridor, so it's not this isolated island. You know, that'll be completed here in the very near future. But we also have Springbrook, and so we're kind of talking, and actually Mr. Busich, you know, put out, well, why don't we build a lid, you know? And I think that's a really good idea. And basically, they're doing it in Mercer Island. They're doing it, and then they're doing it as part of the 520 improvements. They're building 4 of them: Hunts Point, Medina, Yarrow Point, and the Montlake area. And you know, if they can do them there, why not here? And no, it's a lid with a park on top of it. So if you go to Mercer Island, back in the late 80s, when they first started redesigning about, you know, transforming that floating bridge, if you will, from a 2-lane to what it is today, the folks on Mercer Island, you know, they came unglued. And you know, what it's going to do to our community, splitting the island in half, and on and on and on. And so what was negotiated was that WashDOT built those tunnels. Those are huge tunnels. And on top of that tunnel, if you've never been up there, when I was in grad school, I lived for a real short period of time in the only affordable housing on Mercer Island, the Shorewood Apartments. And it's a beautiful park. I mean, it's huge. It's a park. And well, but why not here? And again, you know, precedent exists, not just going back, you know, 30 years, but today. And if they can do it for the really, really wealthy communities, such as the ones that I just listed, why not here in Lakewood to connect, you know, Springbrook? Also, just from a geographic standpoint, if you approach, you know, the Bridgeport interchange, kind of dips down, so they could dig a little further, build what they need to build, and then build that lid and put something on top of it, whether it's a park or some kind of amenity that connects our community. Because as we know right now, folks trying to get across there, it's very, very dangerous. So just wanted to put that out there. I know this would be kind of in the category of a big audacious, goal or objective. But I do think it's something worth talking about, and just wanted to put it out, and you never know where it's going to lead. So I would just ask you all to think about that, and we'll be bringing something back to you, later this summer or fall on that.
If I may address just a quick point on that. At some point, when we went through one of the design iterations with regard to Berkeley, I think in Thorne, there was such a lid in a park, and that got tossed in the round file from a budgetary standpoint, as I understand it, when they did the design-build approach toward the ultimate interchange.
Yeah, it wasn't so much a lid as it was more a real nice landscaping with the double
Yeah, there's a
roundabouts.
park opportunity up there.
Yeah. But here, there would be no vehicles that would travel across there.
Okay.
So the vehicles
Might
would.
make less expensive.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
possibly.
Oh, yeah.
That was a landscaping element at
Yeah,
Berkeley.
some
Yeah.
signage and stuff.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
but
if we
just
can- sure, I'm all
Just
for
build
big audacious
build a
goals.
bridge over there.
put it out there,
Throw
you
dirt
know.
on.
So, I mean, here's the deal, the state split Lakewood, even before it was Lakewood, decades ago, and there was no mitigation. There was no thought put into the folks who were completely, cut off from, the rest of then, the Lakewood community, and look what's going on today. They still don't have a grocery store, and I mean, the list goes on, so.
At the time, and that was a different administration, the transportation guys are, actually at that point in time, this is before regime change, but we're actually very concerned about areas that have been cut off. They're very well aware that there's been, numerous communities around the country that have been cut off. And I actually talked about our areas.
Good.
And so, there is some level of interest out there in those.
Let's see, next Tuesday, June 4th, Farmers Market kicks off. So that'll run through September 10th from 10 to 3 p.m. every day. And next Tuesday, the ribbon cutting will be at 11:15 p.m. and the chamber will be there, and hope you all can make it. If you're interested, our wellness committee is putting together a City of Lakewood night at the ballpark, and that's going to be on June 8th at 5 p.m. However, tickets must be purchased for you and your family members by this Friday, May 31st. And again, let myself or the city clerk know. We can point you in the right direction on that. And then the following week, on June 13th, from 8 to 10, though, we'll have breakfast from 7:30 to 8. Will be our developers forum, and we have a nice program lined up. We'll have a briefing on what's going on here at the city, and then we have some really good keynote speakers, including a gentleman who's been kind of defining himself as somewhat of an expert in opportunity zones. And then also Mr. Heck will be, Congressman Heck will be providing a bit of a presentation via video from Washington, D.C. So, and that'll be at the McGavick Center again from 8. It's not 8 to 11, it's 8 to 10 actually. So we cut it down to 2 hours as opposed to dragging it on for 3. So it's always a popular event, so. And then we have also scheduled all of the summer concert series, which will be on Thursdays, beginning on July 18th, running through August 22nd. So far there's 6 of them. And probably one in there we'll be looking to do some kind of a ribbon cutting, celebrating the transfer of Fort Steilacoom Park over to the city. That should be done by then. City attorney's not looking at me. So that's my report.
That's it? Any questions for the city manager? Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel that on the agenda for next Monday is the sign code is coming back. And it was delayed until this date because there were some items that needed to be reviewed. What are are we going to see anything that's significantly different from the last time we saw it?
Councilmember Branstetter, yes. First of all, we went back and, matter of fact, the city attorney gave me a briefing last week. I know you had a number of questions regarding various case law and federal law and all of that, and so I believe that's going to be included as an update as part of the presentation. As far as the sign code itself goes, so first and foremost, the changes that are being proposed are driven by the Supreme Court's Gilbert v. Reed case, which is we no longer have the ability to regulate content. And so as part of that presentation, what we're going to hopefully show you is really nothing changes with regard to how signs are currently handled. For example, political signs or open house signs or things along those lines. And so the team has put together a presentation to kind of walk you through that, to show that to you. And then as far as any changes or updates to the code itself, what we heard at your last couple of meetings was that, and obviously it's your, I just want to be clear, it's your call what you want to do, but what we heard was that to ban feather banner signs. So that has been put in there, as well as to ban all signs from areas away from the edge of right-of-way. So for example, traffic circles or roundabouts if we have them, or along Steilacoom Boulevard where we have the islands. So those are two significant changes that were not included in the last draft that you had. And again, if we misread council, we'll certainly follow your direction on how do you want to change that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Well, we were expecting notes of appreciation for rescheduling our council meeting for Tuesday so you could watch the Bruins last night.
Don't be a hater, Mayor. Don't be a hater. But I appreciate that, Mayor, yes. And I did actually, I just want to say, I actually watched the whole game. And it's the only NHL game that I watched from start to finish all year long. Because we didn't have a council meeting and I didn't have to get home and just watch the highlights or just the third period. So, but thank you, Mayor. Actually, I do appreciate that.
Still play hockey? In Canada. I think it's banned in Boston, but council comments. Mr. Brester. We'll double up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, certainly, I was able to get to two events for Memorial Day, the one at JBLM and the one at Mountain View. Both were blessed with excellent weather, and went off well, created the sentiments to do that. Participated by a wide segment of the community, particularly a lot of organizations at Mountain View that we don't normally see, but who come out on that day where Memorial Day has a special meaning for them, often because of something personal to do that. I am going to go to the Puget Sound Regional Council General Assembly on Thursday. And up in Seattle, they bear watching, so I'm going to go watch. To return to the issue of public art, out
of order.
This afternoon at 4:30, I went over to the school district of where a very successful selection of public art, where the end of the juried process to select the items that are going to go on the Lakewood Police motorcycles, and that over 100 elementary school artists submitted submissions, and four submissions were selected to go on one on each of the four motorcycles being able to go and do that. And the 4 artists were recognized today to be able to go and do that. Their submissions all came in under budget, okay, and and are going off over there. And as public art, they're going to be seen by an awful lot of people in our community and raise some conversation to be able to go and do that. So on another end of the spectrum, you know, that was a very successful process there.
Is it? Unfortunately, the people who get to gaze on them the longest aren't in a real good mood while they're looking at it. Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did attend the service yesterday at Mountain View, and I was really impressed with the additions that they had added this year with the Buffalo Runs and that. It added something to the event and really brought home a lot of the history that's out there. So, and our mayor, of course, did a wonderful job in his presentation. A lot of comments were made following your statements. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Wolke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Wednesday night was both the Arlington project, which I think is a wonderful project, and the school district folks, especially at Clover Park High School, did such a wonderful job with that, and the presentation was very well done. And then Greater Lakes, which is a great partner of ours, and I think 3 of us went to that along with the city manager, and a little bit different vibe because they're now owned, I guess, by Multicare, or they have some kind of merger or something with Multicare. So a little bit different vibe, but still a very good community partner for us and a very good local business. So glad to be there and handle that. And otherwise, it was a very nice Memorial Day weekend.
Ms. Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow at Rotary, Clover Park Rotary, Colonel Thomas Bunt from Madigan, whom we've met, is going to be the special speaker tomorrow. So if anybody wants to come to Rotary, you can come as my guest tomorrow if you want to hear him again. So my civic duty today, I just have to tell you, I stopped 4 lanes of traffic on Lakewood Drive and rescued a little dachshund. So.
Dachshund rescue is a good thing.
Dachshund rescue, little long-haired dachshund. So anyway, I was almost late. Well, it actually was running across the street by Echelon. And so it got out from there. But anyway, I digress.
So where'd you take it?
I took it to its owner, who everyone was pointing at me, you know, down there, and she was running down the street yelling, and I left my car running with the keys in it and blocked all traffic.
Their new campaign, that's not going to be a problem.
And I was so glad that our police officers weren't, I know, I was so glad the police officers didn't stop me.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
See if you can top that, Mr. Simpson.
Getting back to art, no. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I just wanted to add that, like Councilmember Brandstetter and Councilmember Moss, I was at the Mountain View Memorial Day service yesterday afternoon. I got there about an hour early, which gave me plenty of time to talk to a lot of the people who came. And specifically to your point, Mary, I spent probably 30 minutes with the Buffalo Soldiers. I had written about them, but actually to talk to some of these guys that I interviewed via email was great. And they did add an element that I have not heretofore seen in that ceremony. The mood, the people there were quite appreciative. It was a good crowd. I mean, those seats out there on the road were filled, and I think everybody appreciated that very much. And I'd like to say something that I've noticed when our mayor gives a welcoming. He always manages to incorporate history, and he did it on 2 occasions yesterday when he talked about the Sullivan brothers, and then later he talked about Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt. And I think Mr. Mayor, a lot of people appreciate that. Not just me, because I'm a historian and I know a little bit about this, but it sets a framework, it sets a tone. And like what Councilmember Moss said, I heard a lot of nice comments about the introduction. And I think the introduction carried as much weight as the keynote speaker did. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think the key element's brevity. Mr. Whalen.
Wow, brevity, you say. I've got a few things. No, just kidding. No, I'm gonna leave the art thing alone. I've got enough on art. I had the chance not to attend the Arlington project, but to go visit it last night with my daughter. And many people certainly see it from Gravity Lake Drive, but there's nothing that replaces walking through it. And it's been, I'll be honest, it's been challenging for me to walk anywhere lately, but I had a great opportunity to go through that with my daughter, and it's really sobering. And I think, you know, as we get to the year end and we've had a fabulous youth council this year, there may be an opportunity for us to recognize, you know, not only members of the youth council, but perhaps student leaders who put that project together, because it really is amazing.
There's a history instructor over there at the high school
Is that right?
pulls all that together.
Yeah, you know, when you really walk through there and look at the names, and some have been flagged, and there's some little memorabilia placed in others, and it's kind of, I mean, it's a heartwarming thing. Yeah, totally. And the more that people really know about it, other than the white sticks on the lawn, and they get a chance to touch it, feel it, see it, just the more poignant that it becomes for this military community of ours. Yeah. So if we can do something like that, awesome. Waugup Lake, the Department of Ecology permit issuance, I think is fantastic. My only comment there, being in the camp of what we say more and better communication, is now's the time for us to go back out to the Suburban Times and say, you know, Waugup Lake, the final chapter, and put the information there about the permitting authority's review of the public comments that were received during the expanded public comment period that complied with not only state law, but the requirements for the particular permit within the authority that Lakewood's granted to do it. And I want to just put a cap on it, because I get so, personally, sick and tired of the naysayers who throw any sort of speck of moon dust out on social media and think that they're going to attract a following, when fact is still fact and the law is still the law, and people need to be reminded of that. Could be, but you know, for some people, they might look at it and say, go, you know, maybe staff wasn't misleading the city council. If nothing else, I want that to be driven home.
So, comment on that a minute. I think that's a great idea, but
maybe wait 30 days.
Timing, no. Some people are visual learners, other people read, other people hear things audibly. I think we should have a before and after picture to go along with it. Here's the scum, here's the scum, here's the clear water.
There's no scum there yet, but
we can find some.
Sure.
You know, I think the deputy mayor has a good idea there, and when city manager mentioned that Department of Ecology had approved the permit, I was looking at you, Mr. Busey, for a reason, and that is because I could see the smile on his face. But as the individual who voted against that, and I believe, if I recall, the vote was 6-1, one of us was right.
I wasn't going to bring that up. But
Anyhow, I think, Deputy Mayor, in all seriousness, I think it's a good idea, because I agree with you. Some of the mudslinging that occurred, that angered me as much as it angered you. So but I also think, yeah, you got a before and after. Even though we have differences on that, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and for me, it's not so much a personal issue of dealing with negativity. I mean, that's what we're elected to deal with. I don't care about that. But I don't want there ever to be the insinuation that professional staff is misleading elected officials. Agreed. And I just don't like it, because it's not true. So that's my issue.
Yeah.
I attended the Greater Lakes event last week. It was great as well. I thought it was a good crowd and certainly for a great cause. I appreciate that. Saturday, I attended the Pacific Lutheran University graduation, my exchange student, which again harkens back to the story that Lakewood is a place of great diversity. And this young woman came from Turkmenistan. Our family hosted her from Pierce College. She went back home for a period of time, came back to the United States and took additional classwork at Tacoma Community College and eventually graduated from PLU. Here's a young woman, English as a second language, cum laude. Pretty amazing. Paris Air Show, I am the chair of the EDB this year and have been put on a contingent to go to Paris to attend the Paris Air Show as a matter of economic development work, where the Pierce County contingent, including reps from the EDB and Pierce County, are part of the Department of Commerce contingent back to Paris. We did it last year for the Farnborough Air Show. It's not something funded by Lakewood. I'm going on the EDB's dime. But it's an opportunity for us to, seek, attract, and again, sell the story of Tacoma Pierce County and the South Sound with regard to available land, workforce opportunities, and the strength of our economy. So we hope to bring back some good seats. What's that?
Opportunity zones.
Opportunity zones, yeah, some good stuff. So I look forward to that. And so the clerk knows I'm going to be gone 2 Mondays, June 17th and June 24th on that.
June 17th.
Yeah. It's Monday, right?
I'm coming back that Sunday night.
I know it relates around the national holiday, my birthday on the 18th, but it is June 17th. So with that, that's it. Good events coming up this week. I will attend the farmer's market next week.
So I said it was a personal record for Memorial Day events. Attended the 2-2 Striker Brigade's memorial event at their in Memorial Park. The first Special Forces Group event, which was unique to me. Since I was a Navy guy, I had to have an escort. They're a compound within a compound. The Arlington Project, always moving. And if you haven't seen, I didn't rewatch the movie because I've seen it twice. Finding Chance, Something Chance.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
Kevin Bacon. It's a really good movie. I attended the JBLM event with some of you on Monday morning and Mountain View Monday afternoon, and the weather was amazingly cooperative. Although it's the first time that I thought it was too warm to sit out with a dark suit on for a long event. Speaking of JBLM, and I don't know if the clerk has received the same email, but I can forward it if you don't. They are, Laurel Taft is redoing a protocol list. And so if some of you want to make sure you're included on their appropriate invites for events, send or we could update everybody. Why don't we just put everybody on and they'll decide who they invite to what, but at least they'll have the names of the council members and correct contact information, because it's kind of catch as catch can sometimes. I know that there was a good number of occasions when I didn't know things were going on at the McCord side, and Ms. Moss, with all her connections there, was going out there twice a week. And so it appears they're trying to coordinate that a little bit more. And it may actually be upping the breadth of what the Air Force side does. No, well, what happened, I think what happens to that, so Here's, as far as base access for someone without the universal ID card. Based on last year's NDAA, beginning January 1st, 2020, anyone with a service-rated disability is authorized by Congress to shop in the commissary and the exchange and to use MWR. There'll be like a 5% surcharge on the commissary, or 3 or 5%. But instead of just having internet access to the exchange, you'd actually be able to walk in and, rent a boat on from MWR or whatever. They haven't figured out how the people in that category are going to get on base if they're not otherwise entitled to a retiree card, for example. And it came, last Association Defense Communities meeting, I happened to be in a relatively small group where the head of the commissary and exchange system was talking about their marketing and how they were consolidating and being more efficient. And people were asking questions like that, so I flat out asked him, what are you going to do? What's the base access plan? He said they don't have one. They're working on it. The key problem, that's a long way around to the key problem. The key problem is everybody has to have an FBI background check to get a pass, a permanent pass to base. And if you're plugged into the system by being a retiree or active duty, that has happened at some point. If you're a veteran, they lose that. If you're a city council member without a universal ID card, you don't have it. So they're stingy about the number they put out because they have to be run through the background check system. So they've limited that. That's all I could put together as to why they cut it back so much. It was because of more stringent requirements on who gets the number of people get a pass because they have to process them. So that's now they've got hundreds of thousands, maybe a couple million people who will gain access to, although I think the majority of those are probably folks that have retiree cards, but there are at least hundreds of thousands of people who will gain access to on-base services, but might have trouble getting on base. So we may have a way to do that in the future. The Gimhe and a delegation from Okinawa, but Gimhe sister city folks are going to come here for in conjunction with Summerfest. I'm meeting with Connie Coleman-Lackady Friday, I think. Right? It's a Friday. What? Friday at 3. To go over that. So if you have some ideas, it appears that they were looking at things, they don't have a big budget, looking at things for them to do. One thing I didn't think I do, she had tentatively scheduled a 2:30 lunch with them on the day of Summerfest. My suggestion is going to be, why don't we reserve some tables by the music and feed them American fair food? That's a lot better than taking what? Yeah, I mean, so make a part of the festival there, Plus it's lunchtime, and I got to do a car show thing. But if you can think of some other things, Councilmember Brandstatter has expressed some concern about what we could do. One thing I thought they're going to tour Lakewood, but is there a way to Friends with Boats? I mean, it would be great if we could get them out on American Lake, even if it's the police boat. I don't know how big it is, how big the contingent is. Maybe we could even look into it, whether there's a way that the police and fire boats could go out. What? Yeah, get the police and fire boat. That's a big thing, here the emergency services people. What? Can't do that? They can't drive it. Can they water ski behind it? But something that shows them, things like that, so we can amp it up, because we don't, we can't buy hotel rooms for them and do some of the things that they can do for us.
reception at the country club. They could.
We're gonna have dinner at the country club. We're gonna have a dinner, there's a dinner at the country club. So if you have any ideas, let me know, and I'll run them by Connie and see if we can kind of ramp this up for these folks so that they get a good impression of their American cousins here.
One of the things that Mike brought up the last time was maybe ideas for them to, if they were inclined to bring a gift like a plant or a tree or buy something that's, maybe we could do one of the planter strips at the Colonial Center as something related to the Sister City stuff or a plaque. I know a lot of places they have the Korean Japanese maple tree donated by whatever, the Sister City thing. And it becomes a nice touch that's not too expensive for a host organization to provide for the city.
Yeah, so
Something like that.
Friday at 3. Send me your ideas or your contacts or whatever, and we'll see what we can incorporate. So if there's nothing further, we have 10-minute move to a 10-minute executive session. We'll recess into executive session for approximately 10 minutes pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1B to consider the acquisition of real estate or lease by purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price. The council is not expected to take any final action on any item after the executive session, returning only to adjourn. We are in recess.